Greetings, MacNNers. It's time once again after a short break for your favorite podcast and ours. It's episode 65, the Gimme My Damn Senior Discount episode of the MacNN podcast.
Up for 25-cent coffees at McDonald's.
That's right. Custom made and taking a lot of time to decide what you want.
You know, if we keep this up, the One More Thing podcast will catch up with us.
I know, right? Those industrious little gnomes.
Not to mention the Monday holidays.
Yeah, well, that's an America problem. Anyway, should they ever catch up to us, that will be a cause for a simulcast.
Wow.
All four of us.
Maybe even a live episode.
Oh, I like that idea. With a studio audience. Because, you know, they only laugh and applaud when you want them to.
When you put the light up and it says applause and laughter.
That is correct. All right. We have, well, a lot to talk about. We hope everybody had a great Memorial Day holiday and took a moment or so to remember those who gave their lives in service of their country. Before we get into all the stuff, I want to update listeners who may have missed the stories on Friday about some patches that came out. The first one is for the 9.7-inch iPad Pro. Apple has reissued iOS 9.3.2, if I remember correctly. They've reissued that after having pulled it, and apparently not only does it fix whatever the issue was with it before, but it now will restore that bricked iPad Pro you had because you downloaded the first one.
Yeah, that's correct. You have to plug it in with the USB cable, with the USB Lightning cable, and do a restore from iTunes. If you haven't gone to the Apple Genius Bar to get this all worked out, that'll hook you right up.
So that's great news. But of course, I'm putting this most positive spin on it. But, you know, the other problem is that this shouldn't have escaped the lab in the first place.
I'm not sure how big a deal this was. You can count the number of afflicted machines that came in to see the Genius Bars in Northern Virginia on both hands and a foot.
Well, I always assume these sorts of problems affect a relatively small percentage of Apple's users, but even 1% is hundreds of thousands of people, you see. That's the problem with being so damn popular. Really, you know, there's certain people we know that we both know that would really be much happier if Apple would lose about 90% of their sales and become a small, struggling startup again. You know, scrappy.
That just did OS X machines.
Yeah. All they do is build mini towers all day. Lots, very expandable, but yet small. Somehow. Don't know how that works. But it's true. Speaking of which, we'll talk a little bit later in this episode about a summer project that's got me really excited and apparently is pushing all of our readers' buttons. And we love it when we do that because it's in a good way, not like a Trump editorial. No, this is a good way. So the other patch, though, that I got to get to is iTunes 12.4.1. Mike, what does this even do?
12.4.1 fixes a couple of outstanding bugs. The seamless playback is fixed and some voiceover stuff is fixed. I'm not really seeing a huge amount of difference between the previous version and the current version. I suspect they snuck in some security patches as well. They're not always that upfront about that.
No, in fact, they've gotten less and less upfront about security changes to promote security. For example, somebody outside on the World Wide Web noticed that we were all having to sign in to iTunes a great deal more than we used to. So we looked into it and had to do a story about this because, in fact, we are signing in more often. Touch ID being asked to use your passcode manually more often, even if you're a regular Touch ID user like me. So these things all helping to enhance security. They're also, although this has been going on for a while, they're starting to ask you to lengthen your password if you had a short one for Apple services. And that just makes good sense. It's all part of security, man. And it's good to see the company getting on that. I still wish they were faster about it. But now they've hired back some of the security experts they had before, so should get even better.
Well, it only makes sense in the passwords. The MySpace breach that afflicted all of their users that had an account before 2013.
Yeah.
It's 400 million passwords.
Yeah. I had to double check and make sure that I didn't have a MySpace account because, of course, nobody's been on MySpace since 2013. Whack, whack.
Well, that's not true. That's not even true. They still have 5 million users a month.
What?
Yeah.
That can't just be that one guy from the Backstreet Boys who owns the thing.
He might just be Hammer and Refresh, but...
Gotta pump up those numbers. Google Plus with the Google employees, that kind of thing.
And as we've talked about before, this isn't necessarily one breach is game over. What it is, well, we've got this email and we've got this password, and we've got this email and we've got this password, and okay, well, we can figure out this data from this breach and this data from this breach.
Yeah.
I was affected by something this week where somebody tried resetting my GameStop password.
What?
Yeah, somebody tried resetting my GameStop password and I caught it. Yeah, I got an email saying, hey, you just tried to reset your GameStop password. If you actually did this, then you're fine. Otherwise, click here. So I immediately click here and, now I have a new GameStop password. But that one didn't really matter. I didn't have any stored purchase information. But God, about 5 years ago, somebody tried ordering a computer on Walmart. Yeah, tried ordering a computer from Walmart with my user information. It didn't work because my PayPal account was linked, and I don't keep a balance in my PayPal account.
Right, neither do I.
But still, that's one of those things where you get an email notification from Walmart saying, hey, buddy, you just tried to buy something, but you got no balance.
Yeah.
So that was my first indication that was a problem. And here's the thing. I use unique passwords everywhere.
Oh, good.
I don't have a single shared password anywhere.
Good. That's a healthy practice. This is one of those things that users are going to have to teach themselves about. And it's a hassle, I know. But again, it's in the name of security, and it's pretty much got to be done, or you're going to get a lot of those emails. I just want to point out to people who get such emails, sometimes they themselves are scams. That, you'll get an email saying your bank password was hacked. You need to click here to change that for your own protection and all that sort of thing. And in fact, that's the fake site going there. As a rule of thumb, I copy a link that comes to me in an email and paste it into a browser before actually going there. I don't directly click.
Well, you don't even want to do that. What you want to do is you want to paste in something like text edit and then inspect the link.
Well, yes, that's what I mean. I don't hit return so that the link is there and I can look at it. If it's not immediately obvious that it's from the source that it claims it is, then You can also check these things in Mail by using the view menu to show message, in its raw format, not HTML.
And that's what I did in this case. I looked at and it was clearly GameStop actually telling me that somebody had asked my password to be changed.
Right.
And it turned out that the IP was something like Lithuania or something like that, which is why they had a problem.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry, Lithuanian Tourism Board, but that makes us suspicious. Although someday I hope to visit your lovely country. Speaking of security and issues, we've had a lot of Apple iCloud and iTunes issues this week. Even our staff was affected by some of this. I literally did not open the OS X version of iTunes until today, Friday, June 3rd, to make sure, because I was afraid. And this is not the reaction I should be having.
Well, if you look back on our archives from this year prior to the WWDC, they were the same reports.
Yes, I thought I remembered some kind of pattern here. I'm glad you mentioned this. This is often, I know this sounds weird, but it is when you see a run of issues with Apple's online services, it is often a precursor to some sort of upgrade.
I'm reasonably certain that that's what this is.
Yeah. And if it's iCloud and iTunes, they could both use an upgrade, quite frankly. So yeah, I'm willing to suffer that. But I actually ran into this on the plane home from Orlando. Fella was sitting next to me. Oh man, let me tell you, Mike, I just had the most fun playing this card ever. Fella on the plane sitting next to me, the guy in the middle seat, and his wife were talking about their iPhones. And they're like, say, you wouldn't happen to know anything about this stuff, would you? To me.
Funny you should mention that.
And I said, well, I am a best-selling tech author on this very topic.
Oh, my God.
And they were like, hooray! And they asked me the question. What it was the fella had taken out his iPhone, and his music library was gone. There was nothing listed at all. And yes, he was connected to the plane.
Okay.
So we're like, this is me. I'm seeing this in person. This is awesome. Okay, here's what you do. Let's try this first. Turn off the Wi-Fi. We did that. Music library entirely back. Because this was all the locally stored stuff. Boom, all back.
Yeah.
Why would iTunes not show you that stuff if it couldn't connect to the iCloud music library? I have no idea.
How that interaction, Apple's going to be more transparent about that.
Yes, and they've got to acknowledge that there is an issue. As I've said many times, if you just open up and honestly admit, hey, having an issue right now, working on it, we'll let you know as soon as it's fixed. That's all people want. They will give you all kinds of leverage.
Well, I have a question. Why does iTunes Music Match not have this is the wrong version dingbat button?
Yeah, right. I just don't understand why such a problem would hide somebody's local library. Essentially what we did was we turned off access to iCloud Music Library, and that cleared up the issue.
Yeah.
So why would it do that? That's just not, like I said, WWDC coming up soon. Man, I hope they fix it.
I hope so too.
Because I love iCloud Music Library. I love iTunes Match when I had iTunes Match. And I like having certain music stored locally so that I can go Amish on myself and, cut myself off from the cloud for a little while. Let me just have all those options seamlessly, please. That's all I'm at. Either that or separate this stuff out. Put Apple Music in its own app.
One of the advantages of having a home server is I have my home iTunes music library on that server.
Right.
And that is the master iTunes for everything that I do with iTunes Music Match.
Yeah.
So if I want my original files, they're all right there.
Mm-hmm.
And in case I've used those on occasion because it has told me, well, no, you can't copy this to an iPod because this is iTunes Music version. Okay. Well, I'm just going to go Apple Remote Desktop over to the server and copy the original files over. And then sure enough, it was fine. Why iTunes decided to tell me, no, you can't do that, even though, yeah, these are your RIP songs, I don't know. So the implementation is not perfect.
Yeah.
And it needs to be. That's the thing. It needs to be perfect, and it's not.
Right. There's already this whole, I don't trust the cloud, what if it rains kind of mentality among some people. I used to scoff at such paranoia. And it's not Apple's fault that I don't anymore. It's that abundance of caution applies well and serves you well throughout your life. There's a lot of things where you should be like, this guy's trying to sell me insurance. I'm going to wait and think about this. Lethargy and apathy can take you a long way, quite frankly.
Let's talk about waiting and thinking about something. So
Yeah.
let's play the music. Let's talk about some things we didn't report this week.
All right, do tell. Come on, let's have it.
So earlier this week, the Thunderbolt Display was in short supply at the Apple stores, and still is.
Right.
They still exist in Northern Virginia, but they're not in large quantities. And then somewhere along the line, came this discussion that what the Thunderbolt Display was going to be, a GPU in the display for 5K, because the new DisplayPort version is not in Thunderbolt 3.
Yeah.
And then a day later, Renee Ritchie over at iMore said, well, no, we've asked some questions, and this isn't going to happen.
Right.
And we didn't even report this rumor at all, because would it work? Yes. But the only thing that is moving faster right now in the computing industry than mobile are GPUs.
Yeah, that thing would be obsolete the minute it came out.
The thing would be obsolete in 6 months.
Yeah.
And for that reason alone, it was too pie in the sky. It's a product class that Apple's never had that much of an interest in. And the easier explanation on this is, yeah, they're going to give us a new monitor, but it's going to be 4K.
Yeah.
That's the easier explanation because that can be handled with the current DisplayPort spec.
Right. And I mean, that is far beyond almost everybody's need. There is just a relatively handful of people who need more than 4K.
You can probably argue those people don't need 5K at all.
Yeah.
But
and those people are known as 5K iMac owners. So they already have what they need. And it's not like the market hasn't responded to the need for external 5K monitors. You can buy them if you like.
Yeah, and even if you use multiple signal transport, you're still looking at multiple cable heads.
Yeah.
If Apple wants to give us a display that uses 2 Thunderbolt ports, I guess that's okay.
Well, yeah.
But it's not a good time. It's not a good time for 4K right now, or 5K for that matter.
No, indeed. We were just
4K with the new Mac Pro, we can do with one cable. Heck, you can do 4K with a new Mac Mini right now with Thunderbolt.
Yeah.
Not even a refresh Mini. The current shipping Minis have the capability of doing 4K.
I know. Blows my mind.
It's just, I don't even know where this rumor even came from. It just boom, it came out of the clay.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden everyone was reporting it, and we said, no, we're not even going to talk about this one because it makes zero sense.
Right. Actually, we do this at least once a week, you guys.
Yeah.
There's always a story, roughly once a week or so, that we either, the minute we see it, we go, that's going to be walked back tomorrow. And we're very often right about that, like the Indian Bollywood star being the brand ambassador for Apple.
That didn't make any sense from the get-go.
It was walked back 12 hours later.
Yeah.
So you never saw it on our site.
Yeah, that didn't make any sense from the get-go.
And then the other thing is extremely sketchy rumors that even the sites reported them go, well, this is a little sketchy, but here you are. And we just like, no.
We might mention them in a roundup.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. If we can make fun of them, we definitely.
But that's about it. Well, the cases have started popping out for this year's crop of iPhones, and some of them have the iPad Pro connector, and some of them don't.
By this year's, you mean the forthcoming iPhone?
Yeah, the ones that are going to ship this fall.
Right.
If you remember back 2 years ago, everyone said that the iPhone was going to be teardrop shaped, and there were teardrop shaped cases available.
Yep.
So let's not flip out about this too much.
Edge-to-edge displays, or actually that Samsung-esque over-the-edge kind of display. Smart connector, no smart connector, 2 cameras, 1 camera. about the only thing that everybody seems to agree on when it comes to the iPhone 7 is that it's roughly the same size and shape as the iPhone 6S.
And we're going to see it this fall.
Yes, and we're going to see it this fall.
Well, let's even talk about S versus non-S years.
Yeah, let's.
Touch ID, S year.
Always the best camera improvements, S year.
This is not a Tim Cook invention. The first iPhone S version came out under Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
So.
And the iPhone 4S is still humming along. You know, it's an old phone now, but it can run the latest operating system. The iPhone 4, not so much.
Yeah, I mean, there's reasons for that, though. I mean, and it's a very similar reason to why the first-gen iPad can't do newer versions of the OS.
But this is exactly why I am on the S cycle, is because every time, ever since they first started doing this, which was technically the 3GS, actually. What they do is they look at the phone, weigh up what it does really well, weigh up what it doesn't do as well as they'd hope, and they make massive improvements, particularly internally. Plus, there's the usual new version of the operating system, which again has had a tinkering to it. And I just think the S products are always better than the first generation of that design.
Okay. No, I'm not going to argue with you on that.
The big question about this, and we talked about this in Rumor Roundup, is if Intel has decided that chip development needs a tick-tock cycle, and by this I mean a second full year of development past, well, a third year altogether. Their chips now have this lifespan of about 3 years before they redesign it. That iPhones may go the same way. We'll see if the iPhone 7 does it.
Man, they may, but this whole argument is stupid because we're still going to have the same advances in processor speed, the camera advances every year that we're getting now in mobile. And just because you say, oh, well, the phone looks the same. Well, my iPhone SE looks the same as an iPhone 5, but it's got a frickin' A9 processor.
Yeah, exactly. But also, this is the thing that bothered me the most about that. Okay, Intel, who have been developing computer chips for decades, are running into a wall. And they need more time.
Yeah, they're running into the laws of physics.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense to me. But A, the iPhone nor any smartphone of any note the iPhone does not run on an Intel chip. So, and the ARM chips are not at the end of physics yet. So this is not a problem that should be affecting the ARM chips. And there's no excuse here, except that these companies feel like the smartphones as we know them are a very mature product and there's very few exciting features that they can put into them. But of course I disagree. That dual camera thing that has been rumored, and that's a rumor with a very strong basis in it. Apple has in fact bought a company that makes those dual camera modules. So that does seem very logical.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think that would excite the heck out of some users. So there's still a lot you can do with software. There's still a lot you can do with internal hardware without changing the design every other year. So if Apple opted not to, that would be okay with me. But they need to have, at least this year anyway, they need to have some hook that makes it really distinguishably different.
There was a story we did on Monday, and a regular readership might not have seen it because of the holiday, where they were talking about how this might be a really good sales year for the iPhone because they're the most amount of iPhone owners who have a 2-year-old plus iPhone.
Yeah.
Than there have ever been.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
This is higher than ever. So there's a lot of pent-up demand. Do I think it will outsell the iPhone 6, the first large-screened iPhone? Maybe not. But Apple does seem to be awfully confident. If these reports are true about how many they've ordered, which is somewhere in the mid-70 million units, of that about 55 or 60 million will be the latest model. That's a lot.
I think there's a lot of factors. This is going to be the first year where most of the carriers don't have a subsidized phone.
Yeah, that's another thing that has changed just since the iPhone 6 came out. Unbelievable.
So we'll see.
Yeah, there's a lot going on, and there's a lot of people who have the option now to upgrade right away. They don't have to wait.
Yep.
Now, I'm not one of them, but there are a lot of people, all of us up here in Canada basically are stuck with the 2-year contract. But hey, we only got the 2-year contract option a couple of years back. Used to be 3 for us.
Yeah, how terrible for you.
Have pity.
I've so much pity for you in this regard.
That's the cruel, iron-fisted government of Kanakistan for you.
That's terrible.
But yeah, so there's a lot more options now. Those installment plan, pay-as-you-go, whatever you want to call those new plans where you just continuously upgrade every year if you wish. It's hard to tell yet how popular that is, but I think I've certainly heard of a lot of people who've opted to go for that.
I like having old hardware. I still have my iPhone 4. We use it as an iPod Touch periodically. I don't see the point in turning over a new phone every year and not owning anything. I don't see the value in that.
Yeah.
But that's my own personal thing.
I'm very much in that camp. I like to hold on to my iPhones for 2 years, unlock it, sell it.
Yeah, or something like that, right?
Yeah, or pass it down as the case may be. But, it just stays in service because Apple supports these iPhones for quite a while afterwards. They eventually won't run the latest operating system, but not for a while. And of course, I think we've mentioned before, but oddly enough, the sizes of the operating systems for both OS X and iOS have gone down. That's not supposed to happen.
Well, there you go.
So in fact, like a 5 can actually run iOS 9 and not choke. It's still slow, but it doesn't choke. That's pretty nice. Speaking of holding on to old hardware, let me play that music. So this year, I have to give credit where credit is due. Mike has come up with a summer project. Last summer we wrote a book. And this year we're putting on the overalls, sticking some nails in our teeth, and tackling this old Mac Pro.
Last year we actually did 2 summer projects.
Yes.
We did the first one, we wrote a book,
Yeah.
and that was the biggest, that was a long one. And toward the end of the summer, we also did and here's why you want a home server.
Yes, that's right. We did.
And the new This Old Mac Pro series is a corollary to that series, because one of the things you can do with the old Mac Pro is cram it someplace and stuff it full of drives and serve all your media all over your house.
Yes.
But what we are doing is we are taking a Mac Pro 1.1, which is the dual 2.66 released in 2006.
Is that the original model?
Yes.
Okay.
We are taking a 3.1, which is not the 2007, but the 2008 model. And we're taking a 4.1, and we're boosting them as high as we can possibly go for performance.
Right.
If all goes well, we're going to get the 4.1 to within about 10% of the $6,500 Coke can Mac Pro.
Wow. And how much does a 4.1 go for these days? I mean, just the basic machine.
The basic machine, it depends where you're shopping for them. If you're shopping for them at one of the online resellers of old hardware, they can be $1,500, $1,800. But if you buy it right, you can get one for $800-ish.
Wow. You can occasionally see one at the curb outside your local office building.
Well, the 4.1, I would be surprised if you saw that one, because there is a firmware update, which we are going to take full advantage of, which turns it into a 5.1, which is the next model year, which uses newer and faster processors up to 12 cores.
What about the 3.1? That's the one that's limited.
The 3.1 is actually, believe it or not, is going to be my iffy one. The 1.1 and the 2.1.
That's a 2008?
It's 2008. The 1.1 and the 2.1 still use fully buffered RAM.
Right.
Error correction
Right.
RAM, but at 667 megahertz bus speeds, which stuff is cheap.
Yeah.
However, the 3.1 uses the 800 megahertz version of that. That is not cheap. That is not cheap.
Yeah. Yeah, hardly anybody makes it anymore either.
Well, no one makes this RAM anymore, but there's so many servers coming offline right now that use the 667 as opposed to the 800. Apple is one of the only companies that use the 800. It's proving to be problematic. It's proving to be slightly problematic. The 3.1 can go faster than the 1.1 or the 2.1 can, but at a much higher cost. I could get a 3.2 gigahertz processor for the 1.1.
Right.
I can get a pair of them for about $65.
Wow.
The similar processor for the 3.1, it's about $160.
Yeah, but still.
And there's not a huge amount of performance difference between the two. Now, the nice thing about the 3.1 is it is an official machine that will take El Capitan.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a big plus.
You have to futz a little bit with the 1.1, but it's not terrible. It's not terrible. For our readership, it is on a scale of difficulty where, 1 is trivial of opening the side panel and 10 is field stripping it all the way down to bare metal. Getting El Capitan on a 1.1 is about a 3. Some very minor terminal commands you have to enter and copying over file, and that's about it. It's really trivial to get El Capitan on the 1.1.
One of the other things that you are doing, and this is just a stock thing, I mean, you just sort of, if you're upgrading a machine, you should just do this, and that is adding SSD drive wherever possible.
Yeah, I'm recommending that to everybody. Even if you have a 1.1 that you're happy with on Lion, it's doing what it needs to do, get an SSD for it.
Yeah.
Spend $40, look at our deal page, get a 120 gigabyte SSD, put your system on it, and that is the number one cheapest thing you can do to that machine that will help you on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, you will see the impact just so immediately.
It's actually twofold. The impact you're going to get from an SSD is twofold. Number one, you're going to get the much more rapid access to the applications, but number two, even if you've got like 16 gig of RAM, you're still getting page outs to virtual memory.
Yeah.
And an SSD is so much faster than a spinning platter hard drive for that kind of thing. That makes a huge difference just in that.
And this is just, we're talking about the conventional 10 times faster than hard drives, SSDs, which have now, in certain models have been superseded by PCIe SSDs, which are 10 times faster than that.
Well, you can actually get PCIe cards that will hold PCIe SSDs.
Wow.
And boot from those. I don't really recommend it for the 1 maybe on one of the 5 ones.
Yeah.
On the 4 or the 5 ones that you're putting in the 12 cores in.
Right, because then you're running up against bus problems.
We're going to go into this a little bit more on Monday. I'm sneaking in an article next week about this. There's a lot of things that when I originally upgraded my Mac Pro 1.1, I want to say 4 years ago, I didn't know. I just kind of went with it. And some things I did by accident, some things I didn't. But as I'm doing my research now, some things have popped out which are kind of disturbing. Like, for instance, there's the serial ATA bus. It's serial ATA 2 on the 1.1 through 3.1.
Okay.
Now, the problem is with that is some of the controller chipsets, like the SandForce chipset, has an interaction with the serial ATA controller on these Mac Pros. And instead of being at serial ATA 2 speed, which is twice the speed of 1, it's downshifting all the way to 1. So instead of the SSD running as fast as it possibly can, it's just giving up on the negotiation process and running at half the speed it could possibly go.
Oh, I see.
Now, running at serial ATA 2 speeds is not terrible.
Yeah.
Because the drives are not going to peak out.
No.
They can peak out a serial ATA 2 speed, but they don't usually anyway. But going from serial ATA 1 to 2, that does make a big difference. And you really have to pick and choose your SSD properly to make sure you don't run into this incompatibility.
Nice.
And we're going to talk more about that at the beginning of the week.
This is like car talk, but for computer nerds, essentially.
Well, a very specific subset of them, yes.
Yeah. It sounds like a fun project. And we've heard back from a lot of readers. They're like, hey, I've got one of those models you're talking about in the closet. I wasn't sure what to do with it. Or they just had never upgraded it, and now they're curious about it. Or they did upgrade it, and they want to pass on what they did, which is just tremendous. We just love it. I think what your goal is to get as close to modern spec as possible.
Well, we're going to do it.
Yeah.
On the 4.1, we are definitely going to do it. There's no question. The parts are here. Most of them are already in.
Oh, wow.
It's a process. I mean, this is not, I've done 90% of the work for the entire series.
Right.
But I also want to make sure that I'm not saying, hey, here you go, it's all done, and it's an unstable piece of junk.
Yes, exactly. Also, I'm sure you will be talking about, because this is the area where a lot of readers and listeners don't go. I used to do a long time ago market research for people like Apple. And one of the things that we discovered, and this is quite a while ago, to be fair, but we believe it still holds true today, is that 90% or more, it was much higher back in the day, 90% of users never upgrade their computers, ever. Not even RAM. They never do. They just buy another one.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me, but yeah, if you want to do this for your Mac Pros, it's gonna take a little bit of elbow grease, and you're gonna have to do things that are a little bit outside your comfort level.
Now, by default, of course, Mac Pro owners tend to be the kind of people who are comfortable with some of that. But even those people, changing out RAM, changing out hard drive, not intimidating, but really getting in there, resocketing a processor, that's going to be new for a lot of people.
It is. And we're not reinventing the wheel here. I'm not writing the procedures for this kind of thing. There are procedures that already exist for this kind of thing.
You can find them on the web.
What I am doing is I'm taking my own research, I'm taking everybody else's research with proper accreditation, thank you, and I'm going to put it all in one place, as opposed to websites that may not exist in 2 years.
Yeah. I like it. This is particularly for people who are trying to get the maximum value. Because remember, these Mac Pros cost a fortune when they first came out.
The 1.1, the dual 2.66 cost $2,500.
Yeah.
When it shipped. The 4.1 configuration that I've got, the dual quad core 2.4 was a $4,000 machine. In 2009.
And as you mentioned, the spec that you're aiming for is a $6,500 Mac Pro,
right?
Current Mac Pro. So
right.
That's really something. I do want to mention one last thing about the SSD, though. I was one of the holdouts. You got on that boat real early. I was one of the holdouts. I was looking for a certain price ratio, but it's not just that I was cheap. It was also that you can read 10x better performance on a piece of paper, and you go, well, that doesn't sound that much faster. But then I jumped on board when the price of the 1 terabyte started getting around $250. I was like, okay, that's a 25 cents per gig. I'm in. Man, once you live that speed, you cannot imagine going back. Computers with spinning hard drives feel like bicycles now. It's just.
I yelled at you for a solid year before you did it.
Yep, you did. You were the one, though, who finally said, hey, look, this one is big and it hits your price point. Here you go. And sure enough, I went out and got it.
We have seen 960 gigabyte SSDs as low as $180.
Wow.
So
I rarely get beat on a deal, and I think I paid $230 for my 1 terabyte one.
I also guarantee you got $50 a use out of it.
Yeah, oh yeah. My productivity shot up through the roof until I got used to it. Then it fell back to its usual level.
The normal speed, yeah.
Yeah. Sadly, there's no SSD upgrade for me personally. That would make a huge difference. This old Mac Pro, how far have we gotten so far? We're at part 1.
We've done the introduction. We did the introduction on Monday. We did part 1 was Thursday.
Yeah.
We're going to do an extra article next week. Monday's article is going to be about sourcing parts.
Oh, okay. So by the time people hear this podcast, that'll be out.
Most likely, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. Oh, it sounds great. And I think this is exactly the sort of thing. You know, there's a lot of times when you have some hardware that's getting on a bit, and some people tend to hang on to hardware well past the time that they should move on. However, Apple built some super powerful machines. Not everything they make is super powerful, but sometimes they put in just a fantastic combination of stuff. And people want to help that keep going for as long as it can. We're all about that. That's fine with us. Apple has a vested interest in you buying a new Mac Pro every couple of years. We don't.
Yeah, we get nothing from that sale. Yeah. Just from a personal history, when I moved on from my G4 Tower and went to Intel, when I moved on from my G4 and went to G5, then I used the G4 as a home server.
Right.
The G5 was just too damn loud to put in a corner.
Yeah.
So when I went to Intel, I kept the G4, but then I would shift. My previous tower would go toward the home server. I'd get something new. So there's always a use, whether it be in a cascading upgrade kind of thing for your family members or whatever, or a resale or what have you. There's always something to do with that. Now, the last couple of years, the reason why we can do this project is because the advancement of the processor technology as far as just raw speed has slowed somewhat in the last couple of years.
Quite a bit, actually, yeah.
So that's why the 2015 MacBook Pro Retina is not hugely faster than my i7 2012 Retina MacBook.
Right.
And also why I haven't bought a new one.
As another owner of a 2012 MacBook Pro, albeit not the Retina one, I got to tell you guys, if you own one of these, put SSDs in it. Because you can. You can open it up and you can put these in. Do it. Just do it.
Yeah, again, with the 2012, we may write an article about this later this summer, is get rid of that optical.
Yeah.
At this point, 4 years later, it probably doesn't work anyway.
Exactly. And the 2012 has USB 3 ports, so you can just attach a very fast one externally if you like. Come on, admit it. Even those of you who still use your optical drive, don't use it all the time. Don't use it very much. I've seen some of them that just rusted from lack of use. In the repair business, which I was out, that was years ago. It's just doesn't need to be internal. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to make a Fusion drive, then make a Fusion drive. But iTunes Music and Movies don't benefit from being on an SSD.
Yeah. One of my dear friends is a fellow named Nadeem, is a fantastic car restorer. He'll get the blowtorch out and he'll make a new bumper. You know, he'll do whatever it takes to restore cars. The computers, we don't have to do so much. Everything's sort of laid out for us, and the things you can upgrade and the things you can't upgrade are pretty well defined. But it is still kind of a special satisfaction that car fans know very well when you fully max out the potential of your Mac Pro or your MacBook or whatever it is that you're using, your Mac Mini. So I think this is going to be a great fun project, and I look forward to seeing how it goes. Speaking of things that are back, Apple's back to school.
Yep.
There we go. Look at that. Not only is this year's offer pretty nice.
And pretty early. My kids are still in school.
Yeah, pretty early. But I think this is a huge, loud announcement about the future of wired headphones.
I think it is too, yeah.
As in, there isn't one.
Yeah.
Not only that, but I'll go this much further. If Apple drops the analog headphone jack, I think the PC industry will do it about 2 years afterwards.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about that. We'll see.
They'll use it as a selling point for a while. Hey, we have a headphone jack. Look at us. But then they'll eventually want to get us thin. You guys have all seen the MacBook Air clones, and you've all seen now coming out the MacBook clones. Well, you're going to go down that path. There just isn't room for things that are that round and big as an analog headphone jack. It's a strange thing to say, but it's true. So I think particularly over the next few years, we're going to see the dropping of analog components and USB-C rising as the port to rule them all, as we've talked about before.
To be perfectly clear what Charles is talking about, the back-to-school promotion this year, you get wireless Beats headphones.
Yeah.
Last year, you had to pay an extra $100 to get the wireless ones.
Yeah. So you see where this is going. Now, I don't think Beats actually makes any Lightning headphones yet, unless I'm mistaken about that.
I don't think they do.
But Philips does, and several other companies have started doing it.
Yeah.
So, somewhat in anticipation of that being dropped, but also for audiophile type reasons. Keeping the signal digital all the way through is, to the people to whom this matters, important.
Well, on Monday also, we saw the first computer renderings of a Chinese company that had a Lightning to headphone jack adapter.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all it was. It was just a rendering, but
Note to that Chinese company. Good idea, much smaller. That's going to need to be
huge.
That's going to need to be way smaller for anybody.
It was about the size of the USB to Ethernet adapter that Apple said.
Yeah, something like that. Nope, too big. And of course, there will be, if this goes through, and I think it will, that Apple will drop the headphone jack. It's just a question of when. But when this goes through, there will be much yelling and gnashing of teeth and, I'm leaving Apple posts and all that kind of usual reaction that we get. But in the end, it's hard to explain on an audio podcast, oddly enough, but with a digital signal, you can do a lot more with it. And you're thinking, well, what do you mean? I mean, like spatially. I mean, like compensating for certain kinds of ambient environmental noise. I mean, those headphones can be more versatile than analog headphones can be.
Well, we'll see what the vendors do with that. That's going to take some time.
Yeah, this isn't going to happen tomorrow already. But we are on the eve of WWDC. It'll be interesting to see what we get.
Yeah, some of the other sites are predicting it's going to be software only, but I don't think that's the case.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. But my guess is that, I don't know which model will be the first to drop the headphone jack. They're all saying the iPhone 7. But I wonder if it won't also disappear out of some Mac.
Well, if the case prototype that we saw earlier this week with the 4 ports is correct, there is no headphone jack on that one. It's just 4 Thunderbolt / USB 3 Type-C ports.
This is for the MacBook Pro.
The MacBook Pro, yeah.
About, yeah. And the USB-C is going to change all that, but it's also given us the promise, we'll see how long this lasts, but it should last for a while, the promise of 1 port.
Well, the reason why it's going to last for a while is Thunderbolt 3 uses the same physical connector.
Yes, that is huge.
So
absolutely huge. In fact, if it weren't for the licensing, I would say that every manufacturer would eventually just make it a combo port, the USB 3 and the Thunderbolt.
Well, it's licensing and cabling. The problem with Thunderbolt is it's still a transceiver-based cable.
Yeah.
For maximum speed, you still have to have a transceiver cable. Now, Thunderbolt 3, Malcolm didn't talk about this in his explainer article this week, but Thunderbolt 3 also has a capability for passive cables, where it's driven by the Thunderbolt 3 chipset.
Right.
And that's 10 gigabits.
Yeah. Still much faster than most people are used to.
Yeah, it's twice the speed of existing USB 3.0. It's the same speed as USB 3.1.
Right.
But still, I mean, it will be interesting to see how that goes. And basically, as Malcolm discussed, Thunderbolt 3 contains USB 3.1, but not the other way around.
Right.
If you buy a USB 3.1 peripheral, it will work if you plug it in. If you buy a Thunderbolt peripheral, it may not necessarily work if you have USB-C instead.
Right. Which I could lead to some potential confusion, but I think it will mostly be okay, because I think consumer level machines will have USB 3.1. They'll make this very clear, and people will just know, as has always been traditional. The Pro ports will be on the Pro product.
Yeah, I don't think this is going to be a huge problem. I also think that the price differential between Thunderbolt products and USB-C products is going to be substantial.
Yeah.
So I'm not too worried about this transition.
No, not too much. I mean, yes, we'll all have USB-C to USB-A adapters for a little while. It's true.
I have my own fights with Apple. I have my own issues with how Apple does their business. But I'm a realist. Does anyone really lament the 30-pin iOS cable being gone?
I do. And here's the reason why, and the only reason why. As you know, I travel a lot. I'm often in hotel rooms. Guess what kind of port all the alarm clocks in all the hotels in the world have? They made that switch, right? They went from conventional LED alarm clocks to ones that you could charge your iPhone on. Guess what? They're all 30-pin.
Well, they also have these things called wall sockets.
Yeah, I know. So that's not a huge issue, but still, that's just so annoying to go in there and go, what is this? I opened the door to this hotel with my iPhone. It's obvious they obviously invest in technology. What's this?
But apparently not alarm clock.
No.
I'd like to remind you have one on your phone.
Yeah, I know. But it would be nice to be able to charge it right there, but never mind. I don't think most people are lamenting the 30-pin. And the ones who do, well, they've got their 30-pin stuff and they're holding on to it as long as they can. Sadly, though, I can tell you right now, I don't think we're ever doing a this old iPhone piece. That's pretty much ruled out.
No, that we're not.
Yeah.
That we're not. And, here's the thing, and we're going to wrap this up with that. Nerds have been the tyranny of the cable industry forever.
Yeah.
This is not going to change it. There's still going to be dongles and things forever. WiGig is great. I don't see wide implementation of it. We're not going to have wireless everything. And that's why you have a beef with the MacBook, right?
Yeah.
Is it's got the one port and you can't connect everything to it. Well, you know what? It'll be fine. Just take a deep breath. It'll be fine.
Before we leave that topic entirely, I just got to mention a product that I just was dumbfounded by.
Oh, jeez.
A company called Gigabyte. I think there may be a trademark on that, you guys. Anyway, a company called Gigabyte has brought out a 19-port Thunderbolt dock.
It may actually be more.
What?
We'll see. We'll see.
Is this thing as big as a car? What is it?
No, it's actually, it's about the same size as existing Thunderbolt docks, perhaps a bit taller. But it is loaded with USB connectors. It's got 11 of these 19 are USB of some flavor.
Oh, I see.
USB-C.
Right.
USB-C, 3.1 Gen 1, and non-Gen 1.
So, yeah, some charging USB ports primarily, and then some fully functional USB.
Yep. Ethernet and audio in and out, and SD card slot reader, and it's just chock-a-block with Thunderbolt.
It looks like it's a little bit taller than the latest Airport Extreme. Am I wrong about that?
Well, you're confusing two different things.
Oh,
the Airport Extreme thing that you're talking about is actually a video card chassis. It's a PCIe video card chassis that's intended to be plugged into Thunderbolt.
You're right.
Which is what people were considering was going to be embedded in an Apple monitor,
right,
which we talked about at the beginning of this podcast.
Right.
So the technology does exist, but that technology actually exists now. You can get a PCIe expansion chassis and put PCIe cards in it. It's not cost effective to do so because those chassis are at least $200.
Right.
So, and that's a lot of money for putting a $400 video card.
This 19-port hub includes 9 USB 3.1 Gen 1, the 5 gigabyte speed, 1 USB Gen 1 3.1 Type-C, 1 USB 3.1 Gen 2 10 gigabyte speed.
Yes.
1 USB 3.1 Gen 2 Type-C. This is so funny. Gigabit Ethernet, an SD card reader, 3.5 millimeter audio jack. There's your headphone, kids.
There's actually two of them. There's a microphone jack and a headphone jack.
Oh, God. a PS2.
No, this is the one that kills me.
Yeah, a PS2 port.
Yep.
Oh, that's just delightful. Display port and HDMI. So this thing has it all.
Yep.
It is a buffet of connectors in a single box.
And don't forget the pass-through Thunderbolt.
Oh my God. And so we don't know.
In case you want to daisy chain another one on the back of this.
We don't know the price on this thing.
No, we don't.
Or the release date. They just showed it off at Putex. And so we're waiting to find out more about it like you.
Well, you want your ports? We got your ports.
Yeah, really. Imagine bringing this around with your USB-C MacBook. There. All right.
Don't need no stinking dongles now.
Shut up. All righty. Next up. Well, I suppose it's time to get to the bad news for the week. I hate to say that there is any, but of course there always is. Tony Fadell is out of the nest. It's hard to tell whether
You couldn't resist that, could you?
It's hard to tell whether he flew away or was pushed.
Yeah, here we go.
That's it for the bird metaphors. I'm done.
Okay, good.
Except for Leaf's nest.
Oh.
Yeah, there you go. Tony Fadell, for those of you who don't know, was an Apple executive. Back in 2001, he joined the company and was put to work on the iPod project, and he is widely referred to as the father of the iPod. It was his responsibility to choose the engineering path that they would take on that device. He argued for things like this teeny tiny hard drive that the original iPads had. He argued for things like it having its own operating system instead of trying to cram OS X in there, which at the time was the right move. So he gets a lot of credit, but he is apparently one of these, let's say, difficult to work with.
I was going to say egotistical power mad maniacs, but if you want to go with difficult, that's
okay.
fine.
So why he's not running for president is unclear. But so he left Apple to start Nest. And I give him credit where credit is due. He saw this home automation thing coming and jumped on that train faster than Apple did.
Yep, he sure did.
And the Nest is, by all accounts, or at least was, a terrific product. Came in at a reasonable price, although it seemed a little pricey at the time, considering what it does. It's now seen as quite normal. It invented an entire industry. And I have to say that at the time, this was the last thing in the world that I thought needed a smart makeover. This is the last home product. I figured refrigerators that could tell you when they were out of pop was much more along the lines.
Well, that Samsung commercial's driving me crazy.
I know. But I thought that was much more the way. Home climate change was not, you set the thermostat and that's it. Interesting side note, here in Canada, we don't make our own thermostats. And so almost all of them are in Fahrenheit.
Oh, that's terrible.
So we set the thermostat for 68 or whatever, 72 or whatever it is, and it just feels weird. That's very wrong because that's like 15 or 16.
Well, the good news is all the digital thermostats have you covered. You just switch it on over to Celsius and you're good.
That alone is enough reason to get a Nest. But the idea to be able to control your thermostat by your phone, and you can turn the air conditioning off when you're not there, and this was just, once it came out, everybody went, well, of course we want this. And I give the Nest a lot of credit for ushering in the smart home era, or at least making it seem that this is viable. We all talked about this. Back in the 70s, people talked about smart homes and what they would eventually be like. And it's coming true. So congrats to the Nest for paving the way. But then Google bought them. And I am not about to make a connection between the problems that they've had since and Google buying them, because I don't think these things are related necessarily.
I don't think that's the issue.
No.
I think it's management style, and I think that it's possible that promises were made that were not kept.
Yeah. Back in March, a profile piece appeared in a site called The Information, a subscription site, that had Tony Fadell on the record and a lot of other executives from either Dropcam or Nest on the record talking about how broken that culture was. Product delays, big problems, just all kinds of stuff. It was an eye-opening piece.
Yeah.
That genuinely, seemed, I don't know, Machiavellian. For a home automation company, this just didn't seem right. And there were problems with the Nest Protect fire detector system. They eventually had to do a recall, and then they put them back out. The acquisition of Dropcam and turning it into Nest Cam didn't go terribly well, didn't sell particularly well. There didn't seem to be a lot of growth going on there. On top of that, Google became Alphabet, splitting its various projects up into divisions. Nest is one of those divisions. So it's an independent company just under the umbrella of Alphabet. And that you would have thought would have made things better, but it actually seems to have made things worse. So in the end, that profile piece plus, whatever was actually going on, plus just, I have to say, I have this feeling that Alphabet just stopped paying attention to it.
Google's and Alphabet's attention span is notoriously short.
Yet it really is. This is a huge problem for them. If Android wasn't doing as well as it was. But I mean, look at Google Plus. Google Plus, it's named after Google. Once it became obvious that they weren't going to steal Facebook's thunder, oh well. And they've just sort of left it to drift.
Yeah.
They've shut down parts of it, and then they're moving all the other parts away as fast as they can. So, yeah, this is a problem with Google, and I think a lot of people said that Nest being bought by Google was a mistake, and it looks like they were right. Whether or not Tony Fadell leaving the company and the new CEO coming in will help, could do. Yeah, we'll see.
Well, Tony Fadell is, according to the press information that we got, Tony Fadell will still be acting as personal advisor to Larry Page.
Yeah, Larry Page needs a lot of advice. He used to get it from Eric Schmidt, and then he needed advice from Bill Campbell, even while Campbell was on the board of Apple, which caused a lot of conflict with Jobs. And now he needs advice from Tony Fadell. Now, Tony Fadell, very smart man. And there were some remarks in his sort of exit interview with the New York Times, made it sound like he's going to move into sort of a mentoring role with other companies, with startups. He's already invested in a number of startups. That may turn out to be his calling card. Remember, we've had experience with a guy who was a real jerk to people a lot of the time, and then sort of mellowed out as he got older and eventually became quite the wise visionary leader, and that man was Steve Jobs. Will Tony Fadell turn out to be another one of those? I don't know. He sure spent a lot of time around Jobs, so it's certainly possible. We'll see. But the thing that struck me, and I didn't see this in a lot of other stories, but the thing that struck me about it is Fadell was essentially saying, and he said in the article, I don't do maintenance mode. So he's essentially admitting that all of those products are now stagnant. Yeah,
well, he's admitting that he's not good at continuing the legacy that he started.
Right.
I think that's more what that says.
All right, that's a fair thing to say. But if he's leaving Nest, then he's essentially saying, and I can't do anything more with this company. I can't do anything new here.
No.
What? That just seemed really odd. It's sort of like he's having practically invented the home automation market. He's now walking away from it.
It sounds like he might be.
Yeah, that seemed very odd to me. And this is the whole interview that he gave with the New York Times was super defensive. And it just struck me as I was fired, but I don't want to tell anybody. I'm speculating there, but you know the signs when somebody has sort of been dismissed, but we're all trying to pretend that they left on their own. And he reads a lot like, Speaking of smart guys with things to say about the industry. Yeah, see, I'm the segue king this week. Elon Musk. Oh, that name. It sounds like a men's cologne, and he is like a men's cologne. Elon Musk is the CEO of Tesla, for those of you who may not know. I can't imagine there's anybody left who doesn't. And he has weighed in on Apple and Google's various car exploration things.
Yeah, strangely.
Yeah, very strangely. He is the guy, again, like Fadell, he is the guy who essentially invented this market. Certainly not the first man to ever make an electric car, but he is the first one to get it this close into the mainstream. And with this newest car that he has.
Yeah, it's what, $35,000?
Yes.
It's ridiculous.
This is actually a car that some people go, I can afford this, instead of just millionaires. What was interesting to me is you and I have speculated on this very podcast about the role that Apple may play in future car development. And we've tended to lean more towards Apple's not going to make their own car, or they'll partner with somebody to make a car, but it won't be an Apple car per se. We think that they're making the parts that will go into a car more than the car itself. We've sort of weakened that position a little bit recently because there's just been so much stuff that seems to suggest otherwise. But I'm still holding on to the we'll partner with somebody and we just don't know who yet. That investment in the Chinese ride-sharing service may have a longer tail than...
Weird. That's just weird.
But anyway, Musk has always been the kind of a guy who, well, first of all, he always tries to exude a lot of confidence, but he has always been, in his public remarks, generous in terms of he doesn't react in an overly threatened way when other companies start making their own electric cars. Honda has just brought out some new prototypes of electric cars they're doing. BMW just redesigned an entire division of their company to focus on self-driving, and thus these things usually go hand in hand with electric or hybrid cars. The industry is catching up to where Tesla has been for some time now. And just recently, he was at Code Conference and was asked about the plans, the various efforts by Google and Apple to develop not just electric cars, but self-driving, or at least advanced technology cars. And he was like, nope, Google's not really the threat. Apple's the threat.
Yeah, that was wacky to me. I didn't even see where he came up with that. Of course, he may have been stoned out of his mind, though, because in the same interview, he said that it is most likely that we're all simulations in a higher society, in a higher civilization's video game.
That is actually, he is echoing a theory by some scientists there. He's not. This isn't an original thought.
Well, yeah, I get that. I understand where it comes from, but come on. Man.
Well, that would explain all the non-player characters I run into. So, yeah.
Do any of them offer you quests or sell you good gear?
Well, that's what I'm talking about. Retail salespeople are essentially NPCs.
Yeah, well.
They just do the one thing, and if you throw them an oddball question, they usually can't deal with it. So, that's how you tell. If only Roddy Piper was still around with those sunglasses, that would be so helpful.
Oh, do they live glasses? Yeah.
Yeah. But Google, Musk said, was the kind of company that is going to develop some technology and then try to license it to the traditional car company. Apple, he said, are the ones who are going to try to make their own. And he believes it'll be out, at least 2020, maybe later. And he's got a solid foundation there. Apple does like to control as much of the experience as they can. And I do get the general feeling that they've been, with the services that they've made, that they don't totally control, like Apple Pay and CarPlay. They've been dissatisfied with the rate of adoption, with the integration, with everything about it. This whole car rumor started as Apple is working on a much more integrated, much more advanced version of CarPlay. So I can see where Musk gets this idea. And it does seem like the rest of the car industry is also talking about not just the self-driving thing is kind of gimmicky. We already have self-parking cars, parallel parking, that sort of thing. We already have cars that can let you know where they are in a crowded parking lot. We already have cars, and there are more coming out with some kind of safety sensors to prevent you from getting too close or to try and minimize the impact of an impact, if you will. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a lot there, that there's going to be a lot coming. And cars are really, again, undergoing the first serious disruption in technology since we all had to switch away from lead gasoline, quite frankly.
Yeah, we'll see how it plays out. There's so many different things that can happen between now and this mystical 2020 date.
Yeah, it's true. Like another presidential election. Oh, boy. Sorry, I just have to divert for 1 second to point out once again that Canada's federal elections are started and done in 3 months. 3 months, people.
I just have a couple words for you. 3 candidates enter, 1 candidate leaves.
So you're advocating for a beyond Thunderdome system of government.
Absolutely, with chainsaws and blades, and yep, you got it.
I like it. But I'll tell you this, though. I think that up until now, particularly in the automotive industry, every technological advance was largely oriented around entertainment, infotainment, headlights, that kind of thing. This is really improving and rethinking the fundamental car, not just the alternative system of powering cars, but the whole thing. top to bottom. How can we make this thing safer, smarter, faster, better? It's a golden era for home automation. It's a golden era for car automation. It seems like it's going to start being a golden era for USB connectivity. So I just feel like, well, at least the United States and thereby the rest of the world are on the cusp of some really big technological changes. And having lived through the first one of these periods in my lifetime, we had the space program, I suppose, but after that, the next big technological change was the internet, changed everything. We're starting to see all of these different industries, from television to automobiles, being rethought and reinvented. It's just a great time to be alive. I'm sorry. Even with all the political fuss and turmoil that we keep poking around about, it's just a great time to be alive. This is an interesting period in history, and what's that Chinese phrase?
May you live in interesting times.
Yeah, that's the worst thing you could say to somebody, right? It was a curse. I don't know. As curses go, this one's a pretty good one. Next up. And as usual, it is time once again for App of the Week with William Gallagher. This week, William brings us yet another of his favorite apps, or apps that he found fascinating, or apps that he hates so much that he has to let you know. William, what is it this time?
Where to start with this app of the week? I mean, apart from the name. Okay, the name, it's Workflow 1.5. And if you haven't already got it or used it, I think it's hard to really get why it's so good. And I think that because I've had it from version 1, 2 or 3 significant updates ago, and I've only really just got it. Workflow is an automation tool for iPhones and iPad. It'll string together functions from different apps or from iOS itself so that something you do repeatedly, it can do repeatedly for you. It's like Automator on the Mac, really, but possibly simpler. You create a new workflow, or you copy someone else's from the growing galleries of these things, and you drag in actions from a list, rearrange them, try them out, ditch them, use them. It actually gets quite absorbing. This newest version of Workflow, apparently it does make some improvements to how you do this editing and dragging in of things, but none that we actually particularly noticed. I thought it was fine before. I think it's fine now. What's different, and what has made all the difference for me, is that it has added new actions. It and you can now do more things, and it happens that what it's added this time has made Workflow immensely useful for me. That's the thing here. If you can see something that Workflow can do that will help you, you become a fan. If you can't yet, well, then you understand what it does, and you understand why people like it, but it's not of interest to you. It's of interest to me now. Just as an example, I write one type of article, one sort of article, one form very often. I write MacNN hands-on reviews. And they always end with a paragraph that says, if it's an app, what the price of the app is, what the version of OS 10 is, or iOS, things you need, a couple of that. Important stuff, not exactly difficult. And getting that information, sometimes it's surprisingly fiddly, or it was. Now, even when I'm writing at my Mac in my office, Workflow is so useful that I will turn to it on my iPhone. I'll type in the name of the app I'm reviewing. Workflow then goes off to the app stores for me, Mac and iOS, collates the information, writes that entire paragraph, copies it to my clipboard. And then it goes back to the app stores, grabs the icon artwork for the app, and airdrops it over to my Mac. It is so fast. It's actually fun. That's what Workflow. For some people, zero use, I think. For others, I hope including you, now definitely including me, it is brilliant. Workflow 1.5. It costs $3 in the App Store, and I know that because it just told me, but that is a launch price special, by the way. It's 40% off. It'll be going up to the regular price soon. I don't care. It's worth it.
Well, that about wraps it up for episode 65 of the MacNN podcast. Now, if you excuse me, it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon and I have to go get dinner.
Okay.
Oh, I am so mean. All right. Well, that about wraps it up for episode 65 of the MacNN podcast. It is so nice to be back. We're glad to be here. Hope you had a wonderful Memorial Day weekend. I'm the editor, Charles Martin. Managing editor Mike is over there in Virginia.
Yes, I am.
I am of no fixed location. Last week, actually just yesterday, I was in Orlando. Today, I'm here in Victoria, BC, where it is, by the way, spectacular, just so you know.
And we're really sorry for all the Texas rain. Stay safe.
Yes. So those of you down there, do what you have to do, please. On behalf of the entire staff of MacNN, we work very hard to try and bring you as much interesting and lively discussion and news as we can. Please let us know how we're doing. We always want to do better. I hope you will, in particular, take an interest in some of our regular columns like the summer project this year, this old Mac Pro, like Crowdfunding Critic, which we've started bringing back and is just going gangbusters right now. We've got great app deals and offers, all kinds of cool stuff. We've also got the news. Stay tuned. Stay with MacNN.com. Check out our other podcast, incidentally. William Gallagher and Malcolm Owen do a very, very British podcast called One More Thing, and I think you will enjoy it if you enjoy this podcast. Or it's a refreshing alternative from people who can't speak good, depending on how you look.
They're less boisterous than we are.
They are. They're much more delightful. That's the word.
They're delightful.
Yes, delightful.
Oh.
There you go. And polite. So we'll see you back here next week because you know what will happen? Episode 66. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Goodbye.